It's a question New Yorkers are asked every 20 years, and it could reshape state government. On November 7, voters will consider whether the state should hold a constitutional convention. It has been a half-century since the last convention was held. The last time voters were asked the constitutional convention question was in 1997. By a nearly 650,000 vote margin, New Yorkers opted not to allow a convention to proceed. What is it? A constitutional convention would allow New Yorkers to propose amendments to the Constitution. The Constitution mandates that voters are asked every 20 years whether there should be a new convention held to consider amendments. The last convention was held in 1967. If a majority votes yes, the Constitutional Convention will be held in 2019. If a majority votes no, a convention won't be held, and the question won't be asked again until 2037. How would it work? If voters approve a constitutional convention, there would be a second vote in 2018 to select delegates. Each of New York's 63 state Senate districts would elect 3 delegates. Statewide voters would choose an additional 15 at-large delegates. The delegates would receive compensation for their service. They would earn $79,500, the same salaries paid to members of the state legislature. They would also have the authority to hire officers and staff for the convention. The convention would be held in April 2019 at the Capitol in Albany. Any amendments adopted by a majority of delegates at the convention must receive final approval from voters. The statewide vote would be held at least 6 weeks after the conclusion of the convention. Any amendments approved by voters would go into effect January 1, 2020. Who supports it? One of the leading advocates for a constitutional convention is Bill Samuels, a longtime progressive activist and supporter of democratic causes. Samuels and other constitutional convention backers view the November 7 vote as an opportunity to reform state government. Voting no, Samuels said, means giving up. Several New York interest groups support holding a constitutional convention. The list includes Citizens Union, a leading good government group, the League of Women Voters, and the New York State Bar Association. Some elected officials are on board too. Ithaca Mayor Svante Myrick was featured in a video released last week by New York People's Convention, a group created by Samuels to build support for the convention. Myrick, a Democrat, called a constitutional convention the best avenue for reform. There are Republicans who support a constitutional convention too. Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb has been one of the most outspoken lawmakers about the need to hold a convention. The beauty and necessity of a constitutional convention lies in its ability to reform the system and empower the people of New York to facilitate needed change, Kolb, R. Canandaigua, wrote in February. Voter empowerment is a part of the very fabric of who we are as a nation. There is no more effective way to engage the public than a constitutional convention, and there is no place that needs it more than Albany. New York People's Convention outlines at least a dozen issues that could be addressed at a constitutional convention. The list includes strengthening public worker protections by preventing changes to employee pension contributions, an amendment giving equal rights to women, and the establishment of an environmental bill of rights. The group proposes other changes which have been discussed for years. Electoral reform has been debated, but the state legislature hasn't updated the state's voting procedures. New York People's Convention proposes allowing early voting, same-day voter registration, and automatic voter registration. Ethics reform would be a high priority. Governor Andrew Cuomo and state legislative leaders have been reluctant to adopt major reforms. There have been small changes, but nothing that would dramatically reshape how state government operates. New York People's Convention supports amending the Constitution to establish a full-time state legislature with strict rules on an outside income, lower campaign contribution limits, and ban donations from any individual or entity doing business with the state. If you want reform, you have to vote for the Constitutional Convention, Samuel said. A yes vote is a vote, to empower the people of New York, to take the power from Cuomo and Heastie and Flanagan and really fix our state, make it a proud model for the rest of the nation. Who's against it? Politics makes strange bedfellows. That famous saying best describes the large coalition of interest groups, labor unions and political parties that are urging New Yorkers to vote no on November 7th. The State Conservative Party and Working Families Party are on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but both oppose holding a constitutional convention. Groups on opposing sides of the abortion debate also support a no vote. Our view, state constitutional convention would be a waste. Our view, state constitutional convention would be a waste. In a New York Times story last week about the state constitutional convention question on TH, Mike Long, chairman of the State Conservative Party, said he opposes holding a constitutional convention because of the cost. State Controller Tom DiNapoli has estimated that it will cost $50 million to hold a convention. Critics of the convention believe the cost could exceed $100 million.